Good morning, students. Today we're going to be doing general journal entries. This is step 3 in the accounting cycle. If you would, let's go to your handouts page of Wolf Den, and I want you to find the accounting cycle, and we want to take a look at that. If you'll click that on, this is where we are, step 3, and then we'll move on to step 4, hopefully on Tuesday. Now let's go back to the handout tab and let me show you what you need to click on or get out of your folder. First of all, you're going to need a blank form, and I've posted some of those up here. You need to print out a complete copy of this for the accounting cycle problems that we're going to be doing. Let me show you what they look like. The first one we will do is the general journal entry form, and then after that, this is the entire cycle. After that, we'll have the posting form. Let's see it. Where is the posting form? This is the worksheet. Posting form will be the second one with the little T accounts. So this will be the second one you need. But if you'll just completely print out a complete set of this, it will help you as we go through this. So we will start with this blank form. You'll need 2 of these, one for in-class and one for homework. Okay. Then you will also need your handout that says in-class problem, and then you'll need the one with the homework problem. If you've misplaced those, you can find them on the handouts tab. Let's see where we put those. It's under transaction analysis, net solutions, and fast forward. So under test 1, the second bar down under study guide, you can print that out if you've already lost the other one, but you'll need both of those. And then if you have the completed problem, this will be helpful for both net solutions and fast forward. It will be helpful as you go through these journal entries. And if you need a copy of that, it is also on your handouts tab, and you can find that under, let's see where we put it. It should be net solutions, in-class transaction analysis, net solutions, right there. Okay, under the accounts handout. So get all that together, and then we'll get started. What I'm going to do is to be going back and forth from the information in the in-class problem, and I will be showing you how to post, how to do the general journal entries. Okay. Now, if you'll take a look at the general journal page that looks like this, you notice all of these columns. You have your date column, your description, your posting reference, and your debit and credit column. Okay. Now, what we want to do is to start over with the date. If you'll notice, November the 1st, 2013, Chris Clark deposited $25,000 in a bank account in the name of Net Solutions. Now, you virtually ask yourself the same questions that you did on your transaction analysis page. You have what accounts, what amounts, do they increase or decrease, and does the equation balance? So if you'll notice, we'd already done that in the transaction analysis. Now we just want to see how it looks in the general journal entries. So let's take our date, which is November the 1st, carry it over here, put November the 1st, and this was 2013. And debits always begin at the margin. Okay, so we have to ask ourselves which one of these is going to be the debit. The debit is first, and then you want to indent the credit. So let's take a look at our sheet here with the cash and the capital. Okay, remember your rule. Okay, if you increase, let's write it right here, assets or expenses to increase would be a debit, To decrease would be a credit. And then liabilities, owner's equity, revenue. To increase would be a credit. And to decrease would be a debit. So we know that cash is an asset and we want to increase it, so cash is going to be your debit. It will go at the margin and then come on over, and you want to put 25,000. We want to put a dash sign for the zeros on the cents column. But coming on back, we want to do 25,000. You don't put a plus in front of it, okay? So 25,000, and then you put the dash, and then you want to come back, and we will call this C. Clark Capital. You want to indent about 2 spaces, put C. Clark Capital, okay? And you want to come over here, put a dash for your cents columns, put your 3 zeros and 25,000 in there. No plus on this, okay? So that's your debit and credit. Notice Chris Clark Capital, capital increase, so that means you're crediting it. And then you need an explanation. And what we're going to say here is that Clark invested in Net Solution. Okay. So that would be your first journal entry. And then you want to skip a line and move on to your second one. Okay? So let's go back over here. Now, we need to look at what the second transaction was. So if you go back to your screen where the second transaction was, it said on November the 5th, Net Solutions paid $20,000 for the purchase of land as a future building site. Okay? So you can look at your sheet here. Now we won't always have these sheets, but you do for the homework here. And we want to look at the 20,000 there. We invested cash to purchase land. So ask yourself, which one is the debit? Which one's going to increase? Notice they're both on the same side of the equal sign. Both of them are assets. Land is going to increase. Cash is decreasing. So land will be your debit because of your rule. So come over here and skip a line. November 5th. Okay. We want to start at the margin. This is kind of hard. Land. Okay. And move on over here. And we want to put a dash for the zeros for our cents. Back up. And 20,000. That's your debit. And then your credit, you need to indent just a few spaces. Put cash. Okay. So you have a credit of 20,000, a debit of 20,000, your equation balances, and what you want to say here is purchased land with cash. Okay. So that's our second journal entry. And your equation does balance because your equation is represented by your debits and credits. Debits equal credits here. Okay. Now let's move on to our third one. Okay, our third one is going to be where we had the supply purchase. So let's go back to the sheet. that tells us about it. And it says, November the 10th, Net Solutions purchased supplies for $13.50 and agreed to pay the supplier in the near future. Okay? Now, let's take a look at what we did from the point of the transaction sheet, just so you know. Minimize this. Okay? What you did here was to increase your supplies, and then on the other side you increased your accounts payable. And this was done on, what was the date? The 10th. Okay? So we want to ask ourselves, which one's going to be our debit? We see where the supplies increased, $13.50 with a plus, but also our liabilities increased. So if you go to your rule right here at the top of your page, if you increase your asset, that's going to be your debit. If you increase your liability, that's going to be your credit. Okay, so come back and let's put our date down. November 10th. Okay, and we're going to put supplies here at the margin because that's our debit. Come on over here. Use the bar for your cents. We don't have any cents. And this was 1,350. So 1,350 as your debit. And then you want to indent just a few spaces and put accounts payable. And come on over here, 1,350. Okay. Then we want an explanation to purchase supplies on account. So you can say almost what was in the wording of the problem, okay? And your debits and your credits do equal. Now that's the third one. Let's go back. Let's take a look at the fourth problem from our transaction sheet. And the fourth one, D here, says on the 18th, Net Solutions received $7,500 in cash for providing services to its customers. Okay, so asking yourself what the accounts were. If you want to go back to your sheet here, we had cash of $7,500, which was an increase, and we had revenue over here, which was an increase of $7,500. Now we have to figure out which one's the debit. We see we increase cash, and if you increase cash here, which is an asset, that's your debit. If you increase a revenue, that's going to be your credit. Okay. So coming down here, let's put November 18th. Okay. And we want to take cash at the margin. And come over here, do your cents. 7,500. Okay, that's your debit. And then indent, and let's put fees earned. That would be a good name. And that's going to be $7,500. Okay. And your explanation is, let's just say, provided services for cash. And there's your debit and credit. Debits and credits equal. Okay. Now let's go to the expense one, the next one. Okay, this is going to be E. Let's go to the explanation here. This is the one with all of the expenses. On E, it says November the 30th, Net Solutions paid the following expenses during the month: wages $2,125, rent $800, utilities that should be $450, and miscellaneous $275. So be sure and mark off that $4,000. That's an error. It should be $450. Now, if you remember when we did this on our transaction analysis, we just grouped it all under expenses on this side. Here we have to give them names. Okay. So first thing we want to do is we have to decide what's going to be our debit. Well, if you notice here, we used cash, so cash decrease. That means cash is going to be our credit. And if you remember, we took our expenses, all of the expenses over, and we actually made them positive in our equation. We made all of our numbers positive, if you remember. And so expenses were taken to the other side. We didn't have the quiz on this, but we should have, and you would probably know it better. But expenses here are going to be positive. So now expenses will be our debit. And we have to give each of these expenses their very own name. So let's come down here and put the date first of all. This is going to be November 30th. And the first expense would be wages expense. And the debit for that one was $2,125. Let's see. 2,125. Okay, $2,125. Okay, the next expense was rent expense. And that amount was $800. So come over here. Let's put our cents back into this. $800. Okay. Our next expense would be utilities, I believe, of $450. So let's put utilities expense. And that amount was $450. So come over here and put $450. Okay. And the next one was miscellaneous expense. And that amount was $275. Miscellaneous expense. $275. So come here. Now, if you get your calculator and you add all four of these expenses together, we came up with a total of $3,650. So that will be our credit to cash. We can do one credit to cash for $3,650. So that's what it's going to look at like. And our explanation will be to pay expenses. Okay? To pay expenses. And our debits and our credits all the way down do equal. Okay, now I know that one's a bit confusing. Okay, let's move on to the payment of the accounts payable. So coming back over here, this is going to be the one with the 950. Let's take a look at the transaction first. Okay, so on F, November 30th, Net Solutions paid creditors on account $950. So let's see what we did. What we did here was to use our cash. So we know if we use our cash now, that's going to be a credit. But come over here, and what they're doing is sending a check in payment of that accounts payable, $950. Now let's look at our rule. If we decrease a liability, which is what that account payable is, we're going to debit that liability. And then we're also decreasing an asset. So we're using cash and we're paying this liability. So our debit is going to be to accounts payable. And this is going to be on November the 30th. Okay. And I'm going to put, I'll write it out this time, but my abbreviation is just an A/P. So accounts payable, and this is going to be $950 debit. Okay. Like that. And then we want to come back and indent and put cash over here in the credit column, $950. And this is to make payment on account. To make a payment on an account. Okay, and now it's in balance. Okay, 2 more to go. Now the next one was the one where we had to calculate how much the supplies had been used, and if you remember, I put that one on the board, and we came up with the fact that $800 in supplies had been used. Now let's look at the actual transaction here, what it said. Okay, it said that on November 30th, Chris Clark determined the cost of supplies on hand at the end of the month was $550. Well, let's kind of take a look at how we got that. We started off with $1,350 in the supplies account, and at the end we had $550 left. So the amount that had been used ended up being $800. So that's the amount that we want to use in this transaction. Okay, now let's go back and see what we actually did. Get rid of this. Okay, if you'll notice, we reduced supplies by 800. Now if you reduce an asset, that's going to be a credit. And what we did was show it as an expense over here, because when we start using the supplies, they become expensed. Okay, so let's look at our little equation. What that means is an expense is going to increase, so that's your debit, and your asset is going to decrease, so that's your credit. So your debit is going to be the supplies expense. So come down and put November 30th, okay, supplies expense as a debit, $800, so work your way into this, 800, okay, and then you want to indent, and the asset supplies, could be called prepaid supplies, will be your credit. So 800 in the credit. And this is to expense supplies. Okay. Now I'm about to run low on my battery. Got one more though, and that's where Chris Clark actually used some money. Okay. He took some money out. He withdrew money. Okay, $2,000. Now we have to treat the withdrawal just like we did the expense. So what you need to know is withdrawals will always be debited, and your credit here is going to be to cash because it decreased. Okay, so your withdrawal will be the same as an expense. So November the 30th, We want to see Clark. Withdrawal for 2,000. It's 2,000. And we want to see an indent with cash as your credit. Okay. And this is to withdraw cash. Now if you go back, all of your debits and your credits are equal. If you go all the way up, for every debit you have a credit of equal amount. You have your accounts, your debits on the left at the margin, your credits indented all the way down. I will post these answers also for you to see, but what I want you to do now for homework is to get a blank sheet, and I want you to go through and do the homework problem on Fast Forward. I want you to do all the journal entries on a blank general journal form, and when you finish, I want you to put them, well, I'll give you further instructions as to where to put them. Perhaps after we post them, I'll take up both. So this is your homework, and with that, I will let you go, do your homework, and I'll give you further instructions on how to get them to me. Next time, we'll do T accounts and continue to study for your test on Thursday.